garden. We have all the original plans, the actual layout of where all the plants were put. So the gardeners today are able to sort of stand on the shoulders of the gardeners who did work here in the past.
That's Down the Garden Path, a new series Wednesday nights on Highland Radio, after the news at 8 p.m.
Classic Tracks with Jean Curran.
And welcome back. And in the studio with me now, I have Anne Marie Faulkner, and she is a translator and writer and has translated a book from French into English called Each Day is a Farewell. Anne Marie, you are very welcome.
Thank you very much.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. You're from Donegal anyway.
Yes, I'm from Moville. And I went to school in Curran Community School, like most people do. And it was there that I first started to study French.
So you have a degree, a BA in French Studies from University of London and the Sorbonne in Paris, and then you've got a Master's in Translation from Queen's University Belfast, and 3 languages that you translate: French, Spanish and Italian. Yes. So did you always have a love for languages at school?
Yes, I suppose I loved, even growing up with English, I remember loving different words. For example, I loved the word ebony from Sleeping Beauty. I loved that word. That always stuck out for me. And I loved then, of course, Irish at school. But when I started French, I really fell in love with that.
And you were a teacher before you became a translator, Anne Marie.
Yes, I trained over in Manchester. So I worked, I suppose most of my teaching career has been in the UK, but I moved back home a few years ago, and I had a job, a temporary position back in Curran School, and after that ended, I suppose I was a bit at a loose end. So the Masters beckoned, the Masters in Translation in Queen's, and so I went ahead and did that.
And I'm sure that you must find a big difference from teaching in the classroom and translating.
Yes, I suppose there's no comparison really. As a translator, you're really working on your own, whereas as a teacher, obviously you have your students there with you. So there's a big difference, but the language, I suppose, ties both of them a little bit together. And
I suppose I know, because as I said to you before we got in there, that I taught French myself a number of years ago. And when you leave college, you're fluent in the language, and then you're teaching, the present tense, je suis, tu es, etc. And I know that I've lost my fluency. So when you're an interpreter, that you keep up with that fluency.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because when I lived in Manchester, I did work as an interpreter as well in hospitals with NHS. So that was, I suppose, speaking the language, and then the translation, I suppose, came. Well, you do some translation as well in teaching, of course, but the translation then, I suppose, came really with the Masters, and then my career as a translator since then.
Fantastic. So I was just reading a little bit about the book, and it said it's a beautiful story about a son looking back on his childhood growing up in France after World War II. It captures all the memories, angst and regrets of a lost time and faltering relationships that cannot be recovered. So tell us about the book. When did you first discover this book, Anne Marie?
It was actually recommended to us by our grammar teacher at university. So she recommended the book to us, and I bought the book. I think we studied a page or two on a particular grammar point, and I read it and I loved it, and I just loved, it's a very simply told story. It's very elegant, the style of writing, and so yeah, I thought the author was very humble and honest in his account of his life. Mm-hmm. So, especially his childhood, most of the book recounts his childhood.
And you were saying that you really felt an affinity of the book, and that the book would suit an Irish audience because of its universality.
Yes, I think there are some strands to the book. The first thing he emphasises is that he grows up in a big Catholic family. So I think that's not sort of uncommon here in Ireland. that's one strand. I suppose the poverty as well. They grew up, in an impoverished family, but they were rich in adventure. Childhood adventure, and with all his siblings. So there's a giant forest near where they live, so they go and they play there. And I suppose that reminded me a lot of even going to my grandparents' house. They had a forest. He talks a little bit about the mystical Mont Saint Michel and the myth surrounding that island. And up at my grandparents there was a giant's grave, so that's a bit mythical as well. So there were different strands as well. I suppose growing up as a Catholic myself and going to mass, and remembering the altar boys in those days, ringing the bell, that kind of thing.
And I think that there's a passage about him being the altar boy, and the rascality and the seriousness, the sadness as well.
Yes, he recounts sort of a little mishap on his first day as an altar boy. So I'll not say too much, but I think he was happy that he wasn't at the high mass. He was at an earlier mass, so the congregation wasn't quite as full.
And a variety of emotions, as humorous and as sad. And the French author Alain Raymond, I googled him just to see exactly who he was.
Yes.
And he's still writing. Actually, he's quite a prolific writer himself. Born just after the war.
Yes, that's right. He has published quite a few books. This is the first of a trilogy, but he's also done some other biographies on, I think, Bob Dylan and Yves Montand, who was a French filmmaker, and he worked in cinema himself for a bit in his early career.
And I think you might want to read a sort of little extract from the book.
There is a nice extract towards the start of the book. If I can just find it here. So the town he grows up in is called Trans, spelt Trins. So it's just a paragraph. So he says, Trans had become a magical country, a territory which had completely infiltrated our imagination and filled each of our dreams, that of the group of youngsters who walked along the road. The names of farms and villages were as enigmatic as cryptic messages. La Croix-Bon, Cruande, Le Rochetoc, La Croix des Bois, Les Places, La Villaz, L'Anchauve. We gorged ourselves on mystery, invented thousands of stories, head to the wind, hands in our pockets, free as though in a dream. On the horizon, on the road to Plaine Fougère, stood the Mont Saint Michel. When the weather was nice, you could just about distinguish it through the mist from the heat. In inclement weather, such as wind, rain, or the cold, you saw it emerging above the bay, so distinctly and precisely that you could almost touch it with your hand. The Mont Saint Michel was in of itself a kingdom, a bottomless reservoir of dreams, legends, inventions of all kinds. In one of our magazines, there was the commendable story of La Fée des Grèves, the Fairy of the Strand, which took place right there on the Mont Saint Michel, in front of our very noses. Both images stayed in our heads. The Mont Saint Michel that we saw, the one that trembled in the mist, on the road to Plaine Fougère, and the other one, this mythical place from a piece of fiction which made our hearts race. We were living at the centre of the world.
Lovely. Did it take you long to? Now it's not a very big book, but but did it take you long to translate it? And was it a difficult job, Anne Marie?
Well, the style of the writing is very elegant, as I've said before. But yes, there were some expressions that he uses. So I had to do some research to make sure that I was getting the right meaning across. So it did. I did start it perhaps about 3 years ago, before the lockdowns, certainly. So I think overall, I can't put an exact time, but I think several months would probably be the right answer there.
And I just asked you before we came on air that you haven't been in contact directly with Alain, but your company or the publishing company has.
Yes. So I had to contact Seuil Editions in Paris, they who published the book, the first book, to get authorization off them, and then of course off the author. And then once I was given that, and then I attracted, I sent a few chapters to different publishers around Ireland, and Shanway Press in Belfast came on board. They really liked the story, and then they sort of, I suppose, did the negotiations then with Soy in Paris. So, but yeah, it would be lovely to meet him. Yeah.
And you published the book just after Christmas.
Yes, yes, it came out in January, so it's selling quite well, and I'm starting to get some good feedback, which is delightful.
Fantastic. So where can we actually get the book?
It's on sale locally. I'll start in Moville, my hometown, so it's on sale in Cost Cutters there, and Gillen's shop. In Carndonna, it's on sale in Finton's newsagents, Max and Buncrana, Bookmark in Letterkenny, and then in Derry it is on sale in Foyle Books and Little Acorn bookstore, and then online at shanway.com.
Fantastic. And what's next on the agenda for you, Anne Marie?
Well, I've currently I am teaching in Derry, so I have that to keep me occupied. Let's hope that we can get maybe the next book translated. That would be brilliant.
And have you ever thought of actually doing a novel yourself, like from scratch, just not a translating, but just one of your very own?
Yes, it has. It has come across my mind before. Perhaps to write something on my experiences in France, but I think it's going to be baby steps for now.
Well, thank you so much for taking time out to talk to me, and the very best of luck with your book and with future projects as well.
Thank you very much.
Uncovered Belfast